Commander stood on the bridge of the evacuation ship, watching another world die. The massive screen showed 7, a beautiful blue planet that had been home to 3 billion people just yesterday. Now it was and lifeless. The Devourers had come and gone, leaving nothing behind but empty rock. "How many ships made it out?" asked. Lieutenant Cora checked her data pad. Her 4 arms moved quickly across the controls. "About 200,000, sir. Maybe 10% of the population." Closed their eyes. 10%. It was better than most worlds, but still a disaster beyond imagination. The Devourers were moving faster now, consuming entire systems in hours instead of days. The Galactic Confederacy had ruled 12,000 worlds for 3,000 years. The Ascended Ones, beings who had become like gods long ago, kept peace and order throughout the galaxy. Their laws were absolute and never questioned. But the most important law, the one that every school child learned, was simple: never contact the humans, never ask them for help, never even speak their name in official meetings. Had always wondered why. The official record said humans were a Class X restricted species, and their home system was off limits forever, but the records never explained why. When was young, they asked their grandmother about it. "The humans fought a war long ago," the old woman had whispered. "Before you were born, before your parents were born. They destroyed 3 entire empires in 6 months. The Ascended Ones were so scared that they made the law: we must never wake the sleeping giants." Thought it was just a story. Now, watching world after world fall to the Devourers, those old tales felt more real. The Devourers had come from outside the galaxy. They were not ships or creatures, but something worse. They were like a disease that ate everything. Every planet, every moon, every piece of metal and rock became part of their growing mass. The Ascended Ones had fought them before, thousands of years ago, and won. But this time was different. This time, the gods seemed powerless. "Sir," Cora said quietly, "message from Central Command. The core worlds are under attack." Felt cold. The core worlds were the heart of the Confederacy. If they fell, everything would fall. "Any word from the Ascended Ones?" "They say to keep evacuating. Keep moving people to the safe zones in the outer rim." But there were no safe zones anymore. The Devourers were everywhere, growing stronger with each world they consumed. Soon, there would be nowhere left to run. That night could not sleep. They walked through the ship's corridors, past families huddled together, past soldiers who stared at nothing with empty eyes. Everyone knew they were losing. Everyone knew the end was coming. In the military archives section, sat down at an old computer terminal. They had access to classified files because of their rank. Maybe there was something, some old weapon or strategy that could help. They searched through battle plans and emergency procedures. Most were useless against an enemy like the Devourers. But then they found something strange. A file buried deep in the old records, marked with warnings and security codes. Emergency Contact Protocol 7. His hands shook as they opened the file. Inside was a single paragraph that made their blood run cold. In the event of existential threat to galactic civilization, Emergency Contact Protocol 7 may be initiated. This protocol allows direct communication with restricted species classification X1, humans, Sol system, Terra, authorization required from any Ascended One, or, in their absence, unanimous consent of all surviving Confederacy worlds. Warning: use only as absolute last resort. The consequences of human intervention may exceed the original threat. Below the text were coordinates, star charts showing the location of a small yellow star in a distant part of the galaxy, the human home system, the place that had been forbidden for 3,000 years. Read the file 3 times, making sure they understood. There was a way to contact the humans. It was legal, buried in the deepest emergency laws, but it required permission from every surviving world in the Confederacy. They the file to their personal data pad and deleted the search history. This information was too dangerous to leave traces. If the wrong people found out, they might try to stop it. Or worse, they might panic. The next morning brought terrible news. Prime's home world had gone silent during the night. 12 billion people, including own family, were gone, consumed by the endless hunger of the devourers. Stared out at the stars and made a decision. The Ascended Ones had abandoned them. The greatest fleets in galactic history were destroyed. Entire species were going extinct every day. What did they have left to lose? They called Lieutenant Cora to their quarters and showed her the file. Her large eyes grew even larger as she read. "Sir, this is the Forbidden Contact Protocol. Are you sure about this?" "Look around us, Cora. We're watching civilization die. Our gods have run away and hidden. Our armies are broken. Maybe it's time to wake the sleeping giants." Cora was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Help me call a meeting. All the surviving world representatives, all the species leaders who are still alive. It's time for a vote that should never have to happen." As began sending encrypted messages across the dwindling confederacy, they thought about their grandmother's words. The humans had been sleeping for 3,000 years. The Ascended Ones had made sure of that. But sleep was not death, and desperate times called for desperate measures. The coordinates glowed on his data pad. Sol system, Terra, the home of the species that even gods feared to wake. Soon, if the vote passed, they would find out why. The Emergency Council met in the shadow of dying stars. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered on the massive space station that served as the last government center. Outside the windows, they could see evacuation ships fleeing past them, carrying the survivors of worlds that no longer existed. Stood before the great assembly hall. The chamber was only half full now. So many species had already gone extinct. Empty seats marked the end of entire civilizations that had lasted millions of years. Elder Hose of the Eternal Archive spoke first. He was ancient even by his people's standards, his crystalline body dim with age and sorrow. "Commander has called this meeting to discuss something that has been forbidden for 3. I ask you all to listen carefully." Activated the hologram projector. The emergency contact protocol appeared in the air above them, glowing with soft blue light. A murmur ran through the crowd as the representatives read the words. Many had never seen this document before. "This protocol exists," said simply. "It is legal. It is buried in our oldest emergency laws, but it is there. We can contact the humans." The reaction was immediate. Some representatives jumped to their feet, shouting in a dozen different languages. Others sat in stunned silence. A few began praying to their various gods. Representative Thane of the warrior clans was the first to speak clearly. "This is madness. The Ascended Ones forbade contact for good reason. The humans are not our friends. They are weapons that destroy everything they touch." "And what exactly are we touching now?" asked Representative Ra of the Eye. She was tiny, barely 3 feet tall, but her voice carried clearly through the chamber. "My people will be extinct in 2 days. Our children are already dead. The devourers reached our home system this morning." The hall fell silent. The Eye were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had survived wars, plagues, and natural disasters for millions of years. To hear that they were about to die was like watching the stars go out. Elder Hose raised one crystal hand. "I have lived for 8,000 years. I have read every record, every historical document in our archives. The humans fought the War of 3 Empires 5,000 years ago. In 6 months, they destroyed civilizations that had ruled for millions of years. They did not just defeat armies. They erased entire species from existence." "But they also stopped," said Representative Mora of the Trade Federation. "They won the war and then they went home. They never tried to conquer anyone else. They just left." "Because the Ascended Ones made them leave," Hose replied. The gods themselves went to the human home world and negotiated the treaty that sent them back to their own system. What do you think that cost? What price did the gods pay to make beings like that agree to sleep? Looked around the chamber. Fear was written on every face. These were the leaders of galactic civilization, and they were terrified of a species they had never seen. I understand the fear, said, but look at what we're losing. Every hour another world dies. The devourers have consumed half the galaxy. Our gods have abandoned us. Our armies are broken. What exactly are we protecting by staying silent? Representative Vex of the Machine Collective spoke in a voice like grinding metal. Calculation complete. Current rate of devourer expansion indicates total galactic consumption in 47 days. Probability of survival without intervention, 0.001%. And the probability with human intervention, asked someone from the back. Vex was quiet for a long moment. Unknown, insufficient data to calculate, but probability of survival is greater than 0. The debate continued for hours. Some representatives argued that the Ascended Ones would return with a solution. Others insisted that death was better than asking the humans for help. But as the arguments raged, reports kept coming in. More worlds falling, more species going extinct, the devourer mass growing larger and stronger. Finally, Representative Ra stood up again. Her usually cheerful face was streaked with tears. My youngest daughter was born 3 days ago. She died this morning when the devourers reached our home world. I held her for exactly 72 hours. Her voice broke. Tell me, honored colleagues, what is worse than watching your children die? What fate could possibly be worse than extinction? The hall was silent. I call for a vote, she said quietly. The voting took place in complete silence. Each representative entered their choice into the secure system. Species by species, the results appeared on the main screen. Watched the numbers climb, their heart pounding. In favor, 1,847 species. Against, 23 species. Abstaining, 12 species. It was done, the vote had passed. Elder Hose stood slowly, his crystal body reflecting the emergency lights. By the authority of this emergency council, and in accordance with Emergency Contact Protocol 7, you are authorized to initiate contact with the restricted species. May whatever gods still listen have mercy on us all. Walk to the quantum resonance array in the station's communication center. The machine was ancient, built in the early days of the Confederacy. It had not been used in over 1,000 years, but it still worked. Lieutenant Cora helped them input the coordinates. Sol system, Terra, the Forbidden Star. What should we say? Cora asked. Thought for a moment. How do you ask sleeping giants for help? How do you wake something that even gods fear? They typed a simple message. Galactic civilization is ending. The devourers have returned. Billions are dead. Please help us. Their finger hovered over the transmission button. Once they pressed it, there would be no going back. The humans would know that the galaxy still existed. They would know that the treaty with the Ascended Ones had been broken. Press the button. The message shot out across the galaxy at faster-than-light speed, racing toward a small yellow star where humanity waited in their ancient silence. Somewhere in that distant system, machines that had slept for 3,000 years would wake up. Humans would read the message and decide what to do. Now they could only wait and hope that the sleeping giants would choose to help instead of destroy. 18 hours after sending the message, every communication device in Confederacy space began screaming. Was in their quarters trying to sleep when the alarm started. They rushed to the bridge to find chaos. Every screen was flashing the same warning. Priority override, all CHANNELS priority override. What's happening? Demanded. Lieutenant Cora was frantically checking the communication systems. Sir, every relay, every quantum communicator, Every basic radio in the entire Confederacy is receiving the same transmission, all at the same time. That's impossible. Signals can't reach everywhere at once. I know, sir, but... The screens went black. Then, in perfect galactic common, words appeared in simple white text. Received, fleet en route, prepare for temporal displacement effects. The bridge fell silent. The message was signed with coordinates from the Sol system. Temporal displacement effects, Cora whispered. What does that mean? They found out 12 hours later. It started at the edge of the system, where the Emergency Council station orbited a dying red star. The sensor operators noticed at first strange readings from empty space, stars flickering like broken lights. Space itself seemed to bend and twist in ways that made experienced navigators sick just looking at the displays. Stood on the observation deck, watching through the massive windows. At first there was nothing to see, just stars and empty space. Then the stars began to move. Sir, Cora said, her voice shaking, the stars aren't moving, space is. She was right. Reality itself was bending. Light from distant stars stretched and compressed like rubber. The fabric of spacetime rippled in waves that made eyes water. Then they arrived. The human fleet didn't appear gradually like normal ships coming out of hyperspace. They didn't fade in or materialize slowly. They just suddenly existed, as if they had always been there and everyone had simply failed to notice before. The ships were enormous. The smallest was larger than the Confederacy's biggest dreadnought. They were sleek and dark, painted in colors that hurt to look at directly. Strange patterns ran along their hulls, not decorations, but something that seemed to exist in more dimensions than could see. How many ships? Asked. I can't count them, the sensor operator replied. The instruments keep showing different numbers, sometimes 50, sometimes 500. They're doing something to local space that's confusing our equipment. As watched, the human ships moved in perfect formation, but their movement was wrong. They glided through space without using engines. They turned without rotating. They seemed to exist in several places at once. Incoming communication, Cora announced. Put it on screen. A woman appeared on the main display. She was tall and pale with striking blue eyes that seemed to contain depths of starlight. She wore no environmental suit despite the toxic atmosphere of the station. When she spoke, her voice carried strange harmonics that resonated in bones. This is Admiral Way of the Terran Protectorate. We received your distress call. Permission to come aboard. Found their voice. Granted, docking bay 7. Thank you, we'll be right there. The screen went black. Immediately, alarms started blaring throughout the station. The docking bay sensors were going crazy. What's wrong now? Demanded. Something's in docking bay 7, Cora said, checking her instruments. But our sensors show the bay is empty, and the atmospheric readings are impossible. It shows human breathable air, but we never changed the atmosphere. Ran to the docking bay, followed by a security team. When the doors opened, they saw something that should not exist. A human shuttle sat in the center of the bay. It was sleek and silver, with the same reality-bending patterns as the larger ships, but there was no way it could be there. The bay doors had never opened. The atmospheric force fields had never been lowered. The shuttle had somehow passed through solid matter like it was empty space. The shuttle's airlock opened with no sound. Admiral Way stepped out, breathing normally in air that should have killed her instantly. She walked across the bay as if she owned the place, her boots making no sound on the metal floor. Commander, she asked, stopping in front of them. Yes, that's me. How did you get here? We took some shortcuts. Time isn't as fixed as most people think. She looked around the docking bay with professional interest. Nice station, old design but solid construction. It should survive what's coming. What's coming? The solution to your devourer problem. Smile was both reassuring and terrifying. Don't worry, we've dealt with this kind of thing before. Stared at her. This was a human, the first one seen by the Confederacy in 3,000 years. She looked almost normal except for her eyes. Those blue eyes seemed to see too much, know too much. When she looked at you, it felt like she was reading your entire species' history. Admiral said carefully, "The Devourers have consumed half the galaxy. Our greatest fleets couldn't even slow them down. How can you possibly?" "You're thinking about this wrong," interrupted. "The Devourers aren't invaders. They're not even really alive in the way you understand life. They're a function, a galactic immune system that activates when certain conditions are met." "I don't understand." "You will, but first I need to speak to your emergency council. We have a war to plan." As they walked through the station corridors, noticed something strange. Other crew members stopped and stared at Admiral, but not just because she was human. They looked confused, like they couldn't quite focus on her. Some turned away quickly, as if looking at her too long caused pain. Admiral asked, "What are temporal displacement effects?" Glanced at them. "Reality gets a bit flexible when we travel, don't worry about it. The effects fade after a few hours." "And your ships?" "Exist in more than 3 dimensions, makes them hard to target, also hard to count as your sensors probably noticed." She paused at an observation window and looked out at her fleet. "We've learned a lot in 3,000 years of isolation. Physics, mathematics, the fundamental nature of reality. Turns out the universe is much more flexible than most people realize." Followed her gaze. The human ships hung in space like predators, dark and sleek and utterly alien. Just looking at them made understand why the ascended ones had been afraid. These were not normal ships flown by normal people. These were weapons built by a species that had learned to bend reality itself to their will. And they were here to save the galaxy. The war briefing began immediately. Admiral stood before the emergency council, her hands moving over a holographic display that appeared from nowhere. Data streams flowed around her in patterns that made its head hurt to watch. "Let me show you what you're really fighting," said. The hologram changed, showing the Devourer mass as it really was. Not just ships or creatures, but something far more complex. A writhing network of interconnected organisms, machines, and pure energy that consumed everything in its path. "The Devourers have been active for billions of years," explained. "They've destroyed thousands of galaxies, but they're not evil. They're not even really conscious in the way you understand consciousness. They're a response." Elder Hose leaned forward in his crystalline chair. "A response to what?" "Civilizations that grow too powerful too fast. The Devourers are activated when a galaxy reaches certain technological and population thresholds. They're designed to reset galactic development back to zero." Representative Ra spoke up, her tiny voice filled with anger. "You're saying this is natural, that we deserve to be exterminated." "Not natural, artificial. Someone built the Devourers long ago as a galactic management system. The problem is, whoever built them is gone now, and the system keeps running according to its original programming." Waved her hand, and the display showed streams of data flowing through the Devourer mass. Complex patterns that looked almost like brain activity. "Your mistake was treating them as an enemy to be destroyed. You can't destroy them with weapons because they convert all matter and energy into more of themselves. Every ship you send against them just makes them stronger." "Then how do we stop them?" asked. Smile was terrifying in its confidence. "We don't stop them, we reprogram them." The silence in the chamber was complete. Finally, Elder Hose found his voice. "Reprogram, they're not computers, they're living entities. The distinction isn't as clear as you think. Consciousness, artificial intelligence, biological processes, they're all just different types of information processing, and information can be rewritten if you know how." Manipulated the display again, showing the core of the Devourer mass. Deep inside the writhing darkness was something that glowed with soft light. This is the central command node. It contains the base programming that controls all Devourer activity. If we can reach it and alter the core directives, we can change what they do. Reach it how? Asked Representative Thane. That thing has consumed entire fleets. By getting close enough to interface directly with their quantum consciousness. We need to fly into the center of the mass and perform what you might call surgery on its mind. The representative stared at her in horror, spoke for all of them. That's suicide. Only if you think like you. His expression was patient, almost amused. Your people tried to outrun them, outfight them, outlast them, but you never tried to them. The Devourers are ancient and powerful, but they're also predictable. They've been following the same behavioral patterns for billions of years. We've had 3,000 years to study those patterns. How? Hose demanded. They haven't been active in our galaxy for. No, but they've been active in other galaxies. We've been watching, learning, planning. Gestured, and the hologram showed star charts of distant galaxies, all marked with the scars of Devourer consumption. This isn't the first time we've dealt with them. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow, felt cold. You've fought them before. Fought? No, we don't fight problems like this. We solve them permanently. Walked to the observation windows and looked out at her fleet. The human ships had begun to change. Their hulls flowed like liquid metal, reconfiguring into new shapes that hurt to look at. Some merged together into larger vessels. Others split apart into swarms of smaller craft. The Devourers are heading for the core worlds, continued. They'll be here in 6 hours. That gives us enough time to intercept them and implement the solution. What solution exactly? Ra asked. We're going to teach them a new purpose. Instead of consuming galaxies, they'll restore them. Instead of destroying civilizations, they'll preserve them. It's really quite elegant once you understand the underlying code structure. Watched the human ships transform outside the windows. They didn't look like ships anymore. They looked like living things, or perhaps mathematical equations given physical form. Their hulls shimmered and phased, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Admiral said carefully, your ships, they're not normal, are they? Normal is a relative concept. We've learned to work with reality on a more fundamental level than most species. When you have 3,000 years to develop technology without outside interference, you tend to make some interesting discoveries. Such as space-time manipulation, dimensional engineering, consciousness transfer, matter programming, the usual things. Spoke as if she was discussing the weather. The real breakthrough was understanding that the universe is essentially a very complex computer. Once you know the programming language, you can rewrite anything. A chill ran down spine. They began to understand why the Ascended Ones had forbidden contact with humans. This wasn't just advanced technology. This was something that challenged the basic laws of reality. Admiral Ho said slowly, "What exactly are you?" Turned from the window. Her blue eyes seemed to glow with inner light. We're what happens when a species decides that the universe needs fixing. We're what comes after accepting that problems have solutions, even if those solutions scare everyone else. Outside, the human fleet had finished its transformation. The ships now moved in perfect synchronization, flowing through space like schools of metallic fish. They accelerated toward the approaching Devourer mass with impossible grace. "You're really going to fly into that thing?" asked. "Of course. It's the only way to reach the core programming. Don't worry, our ships are designed for this kind of work. We've done it before." "Where?" "Other galaxies, other Devourer swarms. It's become something of a specialty for us." Smiled, and for a moment she looked almost normal. Then her expression grew serious. "The Ascended Ones were right to be afraid of us, you know. Not because we're evil, but because we're very, very good at solving problems completely." "What do you mean?" We don't do half measures. When we fix something, it stays fixed. When we solve a problem, it doesn't come back, ever." Her smile returned, but it was the smile of a predator. "Do you know why the Ascended Ones really made that treaty with us? It wasn't to protect the galaxy from humans. It was to protect humans from ourselves." "I don't understand." "We have a tendency to solve every problem we encounter, not just the immediate threat, but all the underlying issues that caused the problem in the first place. It's very thorough, very permanent, and very unsettling to people who prefer things to stay complicated." Felt a deep fear settling in their bones. They had asked the sleeping giants for help, and the giants had answered. But now they were beginning to understand what kind of help humanity provided. Complete solutions, permanent fixes, the kind of help that changed everything forever. The human fleet reached the edge of the devourer mass and didn't slow down. They plunged into the writhing darkness like arrows shot into the heart of chaos itself. For 6 hours there was nothing. Watched from the observation deck as the human fleet disappeared into the devourer mass. The writhing darkness stretched across half the star system, a cancer of hungry matter that consumed everything it touched. The human ships had vanished into its center like drops of water falling into an ocean. The Emergency Council waited in tense silence. Representatives from the surviving species stood or sat according to their biology, all staring at the displays that showed only darkness. Some prayed to their gods, others simply watched and waited for the end. "Any contact from Admiral?" Elder Hose asked for the 100th time. "Nothing," Lieutenant Cora replied. Her voice was hoarse from stress. "No signals, no transmissions. The devourer mass is blocking all communications." 3 hours passed, then 4, then 5. "Maybe they failed," Representative Thane whispered. "Maybe even humans can't solve this." Said nothing, but privately they were beginning to agree. The devourer mass continued its advance toward the core worlds, unchanged and unstoppable. If the humans had succeeded, surely there would be some sign by now. Then, at exactly 6 hours and 18 minutes, the devourer mass stopped. It happened so suddenly that the sensor operators thought their equipment had broken. The massive dark entity that had been consuming everything in its path for months simply froze in place. No movement, no expansion, no signs of the endless hunger that had defined it. "Confirmed," Cora announced. "The devourer mass has completely stopped advancing." A murmur ran through the Emergency Council, hope mixed with fear. What did this mean? Were the humans dead? Had they succeeded? Was this some new phase of the devourer attack? For another hour, the mass remained perfectly still. Its surface rippled with strange patterns that the sensors couldn't interpret. Colors flowed across its dark bulk in geometric designs that seemed almost like writing. Then it began to shrink. "Impossible," breathed the chief sensor operator. "It's contracting. The mass is getting smaller." Leaned forward. The readings were clear. The devourer mass, which had grown larger with every world it consumed, was now revering. Dark tentacles from the edges of star systems. Consumed planets began to reappear. But they weren't just reappearing. They were being rebuilt. "By all the gods," Hose whispered, "look at 7. On the main display, they watched as the lifeless world that had been consumed yesterday suddenly blazed with light. Continents formed from nothing. Oceans filled empty basins. Cities rose from barren ground. In less than an hour, 7 was exactly as it had been before the devourers arrived. "How is this possible?" Ra asked. "The consumed matter is being converted back to its original state," the science officer reported. "Every atom, every molecule is being restored to its pre-consumption configuration. It's like watching time run backward." Across the galaxy, the impossible restoration continued. World after world returned to life. Space stations materialized from nothing. Entire star systems that had been dark for months suddenly blazed with renewed light. And then the human fleet emerged. They came out of the dissipating devourer mass like ships rising from dark water. But they had changed. The vessels now pulsed with internal light that existed in more dimensions than the sensors could measure. Their hulls had become translucent, revealing patterns of energy that flowed like liquid starlight. Admiral's voice reached the emergency council through speakers that shouldn't have been able to carry her signal across interstellar distances. Problem solved. The devourer mass has been as a galactic restoration matrix. All consumed matter and energy has been returned to its pre-consumption state. Estimated completion time for full restoration, 72 hours. The celebration began immediately. Representatives cheered, cried, embraced each other with whatever limbs their species possessed. They had been saved, impossibly, miraculously saved. But felt no joy. They watched the human ships hanging in space like glowing predators and felt only a deep, cold fear. "Commander," Cora said quietly, "we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. The devourers haven't just stopped. They've been changed. They're systematically restoring everything they consumed. Every planet, every person, every civilization." "I heard." "Sir, this means the humans didn't just defeat the devourers. They conquered them. They took a force that destroyed galaxies and turned it into a restoration tool." Nodded slowly. That was exactly what terrified them. The humans hadn't destroyed the devourers or driven them away. They had them, turned a weapon of galactic extinction into an instrument of galactic restoration. They had rewritten the fundamental purpose of beings older than most stars. Elder Hose approached them, his crystal body reflecting the emergency lights. "Commander, what manner of species has such power?" Before could answer, Admiral's final transmission filled the chamber. Her voice carried an edge of satisfaction that made everyone present shiver. "The restoration matrix will complete its work automatically. Your galaxy has been returned to its pre-consumption state. Consider this our gift to you. We trust this crisis won't require a repeat visit." Admiral Waite called out, "We need to thank you properly. We need to." "No thanks necessary. We've noted your debt, that's sufficient." "Debt?" But's voice was already fatting. "Remember, the next time you face extinction, think carefully before calling us. We solve problems completely, always." The human fleet didn't depart so much as edit itself out of existence. One moment they were there, glowing with impossible light. The next moment the space was empty, as if they had never existed at all. Only the restored galaxy proved they had been real. In the days that followed, as trillions of resurrected beings celebrated their impossible return to life, the Ascended Ones emerged from their hidden sanctuaries. They moved quickly to establish new laws, new restrictions, new safeguards. The human home system coordinates were classified beyond any previous level of security. Emergency Protocol 7 was sealed with quantum locks that would take the heat death of the universe to break. The very mention of humanity in official communications became punishable by exile. And in the deepest archives, accessible only to the Ascended Ones themselves, a new entry appeared. "Humans are not our allies, our enemies, or our equals. They are the option we pray we never need again. They are the solution that costs more than the problem. They are what comes after gods give up." Now bearing classified knowledge that would haunt them for the rest of their life, added their own personal note to the restricted files. "We asked the forbidden question and received the ultimate answer. The gods forbade asking humans for help not because they couldn't help us, but because they could. Because they solve problems so completely that the cure becomes more terrifying than the disease. And now they know we still exist." The galaxy was saved, every world restored, every life returned. It was perfect. But in the deepest parts of space, where even the Ascended Ones feared to look, sensors occasionally detected strange readings. ripples in space-time that suggested movement in dimensions that shouldn't exist, whispers of signals in frequencies that hurt to decode. Humanity had gone back to sleep in their distant system, but sleep was not death, and the giants now knew that the galaxy was inhabited by people who would call them when desperate enough. In the Sol system, on a small blue world orbiting a yellow star, ancient machines recorded new data. The galaxy had been mapped, analyzed, its species documented, its weaknesses noted. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity waited with the patient satisfaction of gardeners who had pruned an unruly hedge. The galaxy was safe, the gods were in their sanctuaries, the people were alive and grateful. And in the silence of space, something vast and terrible and utterly human smiled.